Today, what we're going to make is a costume reconstruction of a pair of medieval shoes similar to this one dating to 1390, found in London. This shoe is nearly identical to shoe number 47 in the book Shoes and Patents. In order to make these shoes, you'll need a number of specialized tools. Having a tack hammer would be quite useful. Another tool which makes your job easier will be a specialized pair of lasting pliers. These pliers have curved heads to allow the leather to be rocked. Some also include a hammer face and a nail puller. A specialized nail puller can be made from a screwdriver with a notch cut from the tip. There's one tool that you can't do without, and that is a pair of wooden lasts in the size of the shoes you intend to make. Another tool you can't do without is the iron last. This is used for securing the nails which will hold your sole in place. The first step in making these shoes is selecting your leather. I've taken the remnants of a half hide of leather, which is a nice light color because I'm going to dye it. What I'm going to do is lay out my patterns. Now I'm going to take the first two pattern pieces, which is the vamp, which is the portion that goes over the main body of your foot, and the heel. Okay, which looks like this. And I'm going to lay these out. Remember, you're going to lay out two of them. So I take my trusty magic marker, find a spot on the leather where there aren't any major flaws, and begin to lay out my pattern. You want to be economical when you're laying out your pattern, using as little of the leather as possible. That way you have more for further projects. The next step is to soak your leather. What I'll do is I'll take my four pieces, pick them up, and put them into a pot full of hot water. While you're waiting for your leather to soak, since you have 15 minutes, you might as well go ahead and do some of the other pattern material. What you need to do is take your last, lay it down on a piece of cardboard, and trace very closely around it. This will give you the pattern for your sole. Okay? Once you've done this, you need to go and lay out another one, which is slightly smaller than your bottom, than the bottom of your last. This will be your insole. Okay? It's the insole that you can cut out right now. The next thing to do while you're waiting for your leather to soak is to attach your insoles to your last. And I'll use just a couple of nails to attach it. Now you notice, I've taken my last and stuck it on a peg. What this is simply a piece of metal that has the same diameter as this hole. Okay? I've taken a drill, drilled a hole down, and taken this peg, which is about 4.5 inches long, and set it into my workbench so that only the top 2 inches sticks out. This gives me a nice strong working surface so I can use my last. Well, it's been 15 minutes and I can get my leather out. I won't take it all out. I'll simply take one piece. And what I'm going to do is take one of my vamp pieces. The rest of it can sit in the water while I'm working on it. Lay this nice soaking wet piece of leather over the toe of the shoe. I now have two nails in, and I'll split the difference between the two. It really doesn't matter where you put these nails. There's no special pattern. I tend to nail across the opposite side from the instep first with about 5 nails, so it really doesn't matter. With 5 nails in, I can begin to stretch the leather. The reason I start from the outside edge, from this edge, is because that's where this nice sweep is. Alright? And also because this edge is undercut, and I want to stretch the leather across this sweep and into this cutout for the instep. So what I'll do is I'll put the last back on its post, give it a good sharp tug. Okay, now right now I'm not using my elastic pliers. That'll be later. Right now I need both hands for this operation, so I'm not able to use the elastic pliers. Now with one nail there, I'm well on my way because it's tacked in place. And I give it another tug to stretch this leather a little further. Now I can use my elastic pliers because the piece is held in shape. Now your elastic pliers, remember I said were curved so they can rock. You can either grab the leather and rock it this way, or you can grab the leather and rock it this way. For this pull, I'm going to rock it this way. Okay, I've stretched it, I've pushed it in place, and I'm holding it with my thumb. Okay, it's still a little loose, it doesn't fit perfectly, but as the leather dries, it'll shrink up a little bit. And that'll take care of any problems that you have there. Our next step is to begin to work out towards the toe. We're going to want to work from this side out instead of this side. Now it really doesn't matter whether you work the outside or the inside. The only reason I'm working the outside is because the inside has more material. So we're going to want to stretch this way. So if the leather shifts at all, you don't wind up shortchanging yourself in the materials department. So, I'm going to start by filling in this gap by putting this one, then working out to about this point, then do the same thing here, and then I'll work the whole toe in as a unit. Okay, I now need to stretch the material across the next portion of the shoe. Give it a good pull. Try not to get your insole caught in the pliers. That would be a good thing. Take your nail, tap it in place. What I'm doing is I'm taking the next step now, pulling it a little closer to the toe. You'll notice, so I can talk, get rid of the nail in my mouth. If I want to pull here, I'm actually going to grab here so that I have some place to nail. So, I'm going to take that the next step. Okay, I now have basically all the nails that I want to put in the toe out to, say, 1.5 inches away from the point. So now I'm going to work this side. Same exact process. I've now worked my nails all the way out basically to the point. So what I'm going to want to do now is start by pulling this flap of leather back. And I've got way too much leather. I'll just cut a lot of it off. But it's easier to grab onto it with too much leather. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by pulling the center back, then I'll work the other two sides. So, here goes nothing. I'm going to do a lot of this by hand without the pliers because it's just too tough to get the pliers into this little space. Sometimes having a pair of needle nose pliers will work very well for you. Take this, hammer it in. Alright. Now what I'm going to want to do is pull one of these. You basically have sort of two ears sticking off of it. I'm going to take one of the ears and pull it backwards. Basically, what I do is try to take care of as many of these as possible given the tools I have. I'm going to pull the other one back. Tap it into place. Okay, now you notice I have all these big folds. We're going to deal with them right now. Some of them will just be worked in. Some of them will be cut out. I'm going to take this fold here and start pulling it backwards using my thumb to kind of smooth it down. Find the middle of it, the high point, the worst spot of the fold, and stick a nail through that. Okay, and by hammering, you see I can take out most of that fold. With a couple of other nails in that area, I should be able to deal with that one completely. Hit it back. And aside from this bit in here, which is not part of the shoe, it'll all be cut away, I have formed the toe of my shoe. From the top, it looks perfect. From the bottom, it's really ugly. But when it dries, I can take all this extra stuff and use a razor blade to skive it in. Skiving means cutting the leather to like half thickness so that it's all uniform. The next step is to put on the heel. At this point, you have to decide whether or not you're going to put on a modern heel cup. A modern heel cup is a cardboard contraption. It looks like this. They're made right and left. They have a little R or L in the back, right? So it's pretty easy to tell the difference. Find the appropriate one. Since I'm doing a left shoe, I want to find one marked L. And if you want to put one in, what you do is put it on at this time. You simply slide it onto the back, and it'll have these things that stick up. I have no idea why. What I do, simply bend them down so that they're in line with what I want. And I simply wrap the leather around it. But first I just want to get this thing tacked into place so that it doesn't go anyplace. I'd like it to stay with the shoe. So just like you would do before, you stick a nail in and tack it. Go ahead and reach into your water, pull out your soaking wet piece, wring it out a little bit, get some of that excess moisture off, and look at the piece. Now the smaller curve, the inside curve, is the top. Find its center and pull the piece around. Put a nail in. Make sure you're pulling it as tight as you possibly can. It doesn't matter if they're not even, that'll all work out later. You do a lot of trimming on your shoes after you're done. Okay. Tap your nail in. Ideally, you should have about the same amount of leather here as you do heel cup. And these line up just perfectly. So you give it a stretch, and you go. And remember, it's very much like doing a toe. So you start with the center and work your way out. Okay, I've got my center tacked down. Then find the two ears, knock them down, and we'll just work our way out. And you probably don't have to use the pliers too much for doing the heel, because the heel wants to form this direction. Now I've done 3 nails, the center and these 2 sides. I'm then going to go to the outside edges, out here, pulling it a little bit. Do the same thing on the opposite side. Now I've gone here, 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 here. I'm just sort of making a little star pattern. Pull it a little bit. You notice I'm doing this all with my hands, no pliers needed. For this, it's fairly easy to do this portion of it. Okay. You can then go and put 2 in here, and then go back and finish that heel. Okay, I'm going to take these other little bumps out, and I'll be set. Doesn't really matter how many nails you use, just as long as you use a system. I always make little stars and always fill in the gaps. Keep working, centering in between 2 nails, and you'll be fine if you keep a consistent pattern. Alright, there we have them. Both shoes are to the finished state for stage 1. Basically, both shoes have been nailed onto the last while they were wet, and they're ready to sit overnight and dry. So don't worry about how it looks from the bottom, just worry about how it winds up from the top. And as you can see, both shoes are essentially the same from the top. Well, the shoes have been hung up overnight, and we're ready to take the next step. What we'll be doing here is trimming off some of the excess leather while the shoe is still nailed to the last. Okay, I'm also going to take the X-Acto knife and run it across. By the way, remember, this can also be done with a razor blade. Run it across some of the high spots. This is called skiving. What I'm doing is simply lowering it down to a more manageable level. I'm removing some of the extra material that's sticking up. Do the same thing here. You don't want to remove too much, but if it's causing a problem like this with a lump, you want to get rid of it. Both shoes have been trimmed and skived. Now you notice that the insides edges don't match. That doesn't matter one bit. This will all be filled with one more layer of material. So I've just gone ahead and left all this extra stuff in here because that means that that's a little bit less that I have to use to cut out of the other piece to fill this space. Once again, I'm going to use my screwdriver with the notch cut in it. I could also use my other screwdriver that has the bent tip for a pry bar. I think I'll start though with the one with the notch cut in it, because I seem to like that one best. And all I'm doing, let me pull my wastebasket over, is pulling out the nails that are holding the leather down, tossing them out. Once these are all out, the shoe will still be kind of stuck to the last. Well, I think you can get the basic idea. I'll just finish pulling out the rest of these nails, then do the same thing to the other shoe, and we'll be all set for our next step. Okay, I've got all the pieces, and they're all removable from the shoe. Oh, I missed a nail. They're all removable from the shoe. And you can see how this piece holds now the shape of the last. So what I'm going to do is take my last, lay my insole back down on it, coat it with a little bit of glue, using my contact cement, and do the same thing to this side, and then stick them together. The trick to using contact cement is to spread it on both pieces evenly, and then let it sit for 2, 4, 6 minutes. That saves you having to clean your brush each time. Be careful not to leave any strings. Contact cement tends to string. By that I mean, when you pick it up from the can, as you'll see here, it tends to fall. This falling is what's called a string. And sometimes they'll be stuck to the can as you're bringing it over to your piece, and you wind up getting it on a part that you don't want it on. Then comes down to the heel cup. Now remember to omit this stage if you're not going to be using this. You're not going to be putting a heel cup on. And carefully coat the inside of your heel cup without getting it up onto the back. But what I'm going to do is, since I'm doing the heel completely first, is I'm going to go ahead and paint the rubber cement on that will hold the heel cup into place. Okay, now carefully take your shoe piece, paint it on the inside just as you've done before, getting it only on the lip that'll go down to the bottom if you're doing a shoe without a heel cup. If you're doing a shoe with a heel cup, what you'll want to look for is the impression made by the heel cup when you're lasting. Now I can see because there's a slight discoloration. There's a line that runs like this. So I know exactly where it's going to touch. So I want to be sure that I paint it on in that area only. The glue is tacky and we're all ready to go. Take your insole and set it on your piece. Now you want to be sure to get it set on the piece just perfectly, because this is sort of the moment of truth. Pick up your heel cup and press it into place. Now you can always rearrange the piece a little bit, but not too much. At this point, what you want to do is kind of hammer it into place. That may sound strange, hammering glue, but that's what sets it and makes it permanent. The heel cup is now permanently attached. Pick up your heel piece, slide it into place, and it'll take a little bit more work to get it perfect. But I think it's fairly easy to get it right if you're willing to mess around with a little bit so that you get it just perfect. Okay, it's where we want it to be. Now we take a look at the toe, see how it fits. Okay, I have not coated the inside of the toe. I could if I wanted to have done it at the same time, but I didn't really feel like doing that. Okay, now I see that I have all this extra material under here. So before it gets to be too late, see how this side is longer. I'm just going to go ahead and cut them evenly. Using my X-Acto knife. Be careful not to cut through your insole at this point. Now, I'll do the same thing I did before with the toe piece. Carefully. This is where carefully is really important here. This is where it's dangerous because you might get a little bit of glue on the outside. If you get a bit of glue on the outside, have some solvent handy for removing this glue. The makers will recommend the solvent for this. And clean it up absolutely immediately. A little bit of time has passed, and the glue for the toe is all tacky and set up. In the meantime, what I've done is I've coated all of the other pieces, so they'll be ready to stick together as soon as I get the toe piece attached. The toe piece is a little tricky. You've got to be sure you get it in exactly the right space, and you're gonna wind up touching in spots, and so just be careful. I always start by working the toe first. Start with the toe. Get your toe into place, and all the rest will fall into place naturally. Seems to all be in place, so I'll go ahead and hammer it down. Now that we have the shoes glued together, what I'm going to do is make the pattern for the slip sole. And this is done by taking an ordinary piece of paper. I'm using an old paper bag. And sticking the shoe on the post. Laying it over. I'm going to use my thumbnail to make an impression of the ridge made by the difference in the two layers of leather. You can use your thumbnail to make a depression. Then take a magic marker. Go through and take this piece and see if it fits into your hole. Okay? Here's a perfect pattern of my slip sole piece. Now the slip sole is simply the bit of material that goes between your insole and your sole, which will go over this. Your slip sole pattern is one of the few worthless patterns because each shoe is different. So when you're done with this, you simply throw it away. As far as materials go for the slip sole, you can use just about anything you want. You can use a high-tech foam of some sort, or a bit of cork. That's fairly common. That's what I typically do. Or you can even use another layer of leather if you just simply want to put it in. Medieval shoes do not have these, but they make your shoes a little bit more comfortable, so I recommend putting one. I'm going to take a piece of this really repulsive, sort of plasticized leather that's not much good for anything else, and lay out my pattern on it. And I'll put that in there because I really wouldn't want anybody to see this leather, but since it's on the inside of my piece, I think it's quite all right. All right, it fits just fine now. We do it just like we did before. You take the open space, give it a nice healthy coat. Coat the flesh side, or the rough side of this piece. Well, here we are. The insole or the slip sole has been set in. I've taken and sewed up the sides and put a row of stitching through the back of the shoe to hold the heel cup in place. You don't have to do this, but I kind of like this line of stitching. It's kind of decorative with the waves in it and everything, and I think that it makes the shoe look a little bit better. But you don't need to do that. A glue will hold it just fine. The next step is to take the sole piece, sole pattern that you had made, and lay it out on leather like I've done. Now the leather that I've chosen to use is approximately 1/8 of 1 inch thick. It's not very heavy, it's fairly supple, but it's certainly much heavier than, say, the leather I used for this. So what we have to do is to take our shoe piece and glue it up. So what I do is I stick it on the iron last, just because that's a nice convenient way. By the way, you've noticed I've taken it off the wooden last. We're done with the wooden last. I take it, I put it on the iron last, because that's a nice stand to hold it on. Get out my glue, carefully cover the entire bottom of the shoe with glue. Remember, you don't want to get any on the visible portion of the leather. I've coated this with glue, and the glue is dried. This has been coated with glue. So now I stick it together. Get it all lined up so it's perfect. Rub it down. Take my hammer. Tap it into place. Take your nails, same nails you used before, the appropriate length. Stick them through the leather and hammer them down. When they encounter the metal plate, make sure, by the way, your metal plate's right in the same spot, and the correct spot. When they encounter the metal plate, they'll turn back onto themselves and form a little staple. Usually. And that's if they go in straight. If they go in cockeyed, they won't work at all. And they may cause problems with your feet. Okay. I'm putting them 3/4 of an inch apart out here. When I get closer to the toe, I'll make them much closer. So, I'm going to put them, instead of putting them in 3/4 of an inch, someplace less than a 1/2 inch, but more than 1/4, I guess is what I'm putting them. Closer to the quarters. So, here we are. The toe is all nailed, as is the rest of the shoe. Now I've wound up with just a little bit of extra material right here at the back edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and just remove it. Now that our shoe is basically constructed, what we have to do is make it look like the original. So what I'm going to do is cut across here and then make a slit down. and then cut a sort of a V out, because that's a part of the shape that the original shoe had. And then I'll cut this down and over. So let me start with cutting for the latchet. Okay, then we have to make the cut down to allow the latchet to be free. Now we have to cut our V in. Okay, we now have our latchet free and our cut downward. And now what I have to do is I'm going to use a rotary hole punch to make the two holes. Now you can cut these out with an X-Acto knife or a razor blade, but it's much easier if you have a hole punch handy. Now what we have is a shoe which greatly resembles this one. Remember, the latchet goes on the outside of the foot. Well, now both shoes have been cut so they match. What I need to do now is make the bifurcated latchet, which is simply a piece of leather that comes over the top and has been split. So I'll clear the shoes out of the way, take my hole punch, punch a very small hole, about 3/4 of an inch, from the end of a little strip that I made. And now I'm taking my X-Acto knife and just cutting from this hole through the center out to the ends. What this will give me is my bifurcated latchet. What you're going to want to do is stitch this piece along this seam line. Okay? So from the inside you'll sit like this. And once that's done, we're ready to dye it. And that'll be our last step. Well, here we are with a finished pair of shoes. Basically all you have to do now is dye them to whatever color you want them to be, and you're ready to wear them. You thread these things through the holes and tie them. It looks like this. Go out and make yourself a pair of shoes. As you've seen, they're fairly easy. Take a minimum of tools. There's only 2 tools that you need to have: a last of the wooden style and a last of the iron style. All the rest are things that you probably already have around the house. They're not expensive, and they add quite a bit to any medieval costume. So try a pair. I think you'll find it's a rewarding experience and one that's worth your time. So, happy shoemaking. Bye.